Welcome to Gardening 101. In the last episode I showed you how to plant a tomato plant. We went through all the steps in setting up the soil and getting the plant in the ground. Today we're going to talk about tying the plant up to a stake, bottom pruning, why that's important, how to remove and identify suckers, why you may want to do that. And I'm also going to cut in some video I did of using hot compost on some other tomato plants. Compost is a great way to feed your plants and it doesn't cost anything. Once you start making your own compost, you get great organic matter, great organic fertilizer. Here's my back porch compost tumbler from Mantis. They have all kinds of compost tumblers you can use for your garden yard. I just want to show you how I used hot compost. It's a hot composting process that took 6 to 8 weeks to break down coffee grounds, and how I used it in my larger tomatoes over here. I used to make hot compost up on the hill there, and it was a pain because I always had to go out there. I had to use a tarp. The compost tumbler makes a huge difference. Sitting up there now is just a bunch of weeds and stuff, and that's good to cold compost. Cold compost can take 6 months to a year or longer. Hot composting gets you compost in 8 weeks. All right, so let me show you what we have. I used coffee grounds, and again, I'll link the video. You can see how I made it. This is the compost right out of the Mantis composter, and these balls are there because, you know, when Starbucks, that's where you can get coffee for free. Just go in and ask for their used coffee. It comes right out of their machines and it's in these little balls. So this is broken down, 90-95%, perfect for the garden. I want to go in and break it up. So I'm doing about 5 parts compost to 1 part peat moss, and I'm just throwing in the peat moss and breaking up all those balls. And this is what I'm going to put down onto my garden. And because compost is really, it's like probably a 0.01, 0.01, 0.01 nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It's really low. This is going to be soluble. It's already been broken down. Your plant's going to be able to use it, and it will continue to break down. And you can see some of the stems in there. That will break down further. There are pine needles in there. I use newspaper. And I wanted consistency that looks something like this. And I'm going to really use it almost as a mulch mid-July, and this will take care of feeding my plants for at least another month. So your tomato stem goes into the ground. Right about here you can see surface roots coming out. These surface roots will cover this entire space. All these tomatoes have surface roots that are mingling together. You can see one there I just dug up. When you top dress, you are setting your compost down on top. It's already broken down. And the compost, just take a couple handfuls and drop it around just like that. So let's start with tying the tomato plant up. This is Mick. I actually gave it a name because this is the only tomato plant we're going to focus on. And you can see how big the tomato plant has gotten. It's about 3 feet tall. It's doing extremely well. And the first thing you want to do is you want to drop in about a 6-foot pole, 8-foot pole. The beefsteak is going to get tall. And if you do this right away when you first put the plant in the ground, it's going to be okay. It won't damage the roots. If you do this later, just make sure you don't put the pole or the stake too close to the stem, because when you sink it into the ground, you're going to shear off a lot of roots. So just put it maybe 2, 4, 6 inches away from the tomato plant. It's going to get big and we can just lean it to the post. And you can see how it wants to flop and crawl around. That's because it's a vine. So we tie it up to help control the growth, and we just want to leave a nice big space. We don't want to tie this really tight. It will choke off the tomato plant as the stem develops. So that's all we want to do. Nice and loose, and that will provide support. There's no set way to do this. It's more of an art. It doesn't have to look pretty. We're going to take the other stem and we're going to just tie it to the post too. And we just want it to grow straight up the stake and stay off the ground. And we'll put on the third one too. And again, just gently loop it around and that will provide enough support for the vines to grow upward. And if you noticed, when we planted this in the last episode, there was only one real main stem growing up. What comes out of a tomato plant are suckers. They're not harmful. Sucker sounds terrible, like it's taking the life out of the plant. Suckers just turn into other production stems that grow leaves and flowers. We'll get to that in a second. But you prune them back so that you just manage the size of the plant. Now, if you're in a zone, I'm in Maryland Zone 7, I get leaf spot and I get early blight. But if you're in a zone that doesn't have problems with disease, and you can just let a tomato plant get as large as it at once and you don't get any problems, you don't have to prune. But I have problems, so you want to have a nice airflow through your plant. You want to have some foliage removed so air can circulate through, keep the plant dry, keep the air moving, make it harder for fungus and diseases to land on your plant. So this is about 3 foot. You want to eventually create about a 8 to 12 inch gap from the leaves of the plant to the soil. And the reason you do that, again, is airflow. And it also creates sort of a splash barrier. Any diseases or a fungus that come from the ground, when it rains or you water, it can splash up, spores can splash up and get onto your leaves. So you remove the bottom leaves, and you can see the bottom leaves have a lot of holes in there from something chewing on it. Inspect the leaves. I don't see any disease or problems on the leaves right now, but I just removed a handful of leaves from the bottom. As the plant grows another 6 inches, I may take a couple more off. As it grows another foot, I will move more. And eventually we'll have a gap down here that will let air flow through, and it creates a disease splash barrier, so to speak, so that you have a big gap between splashing soil and it getting up onto your leaves. Now the next thing to talk about is what are suckers. And there's a couple in here. I'll show you what they are. Let's just start with the main stem. Main stem starts in the earth, it goes up. Everything over here are suckers. I'll talk about that in a second. But the main stem goes up, and then you see a leaf come out, and then the stem continues up, and right in there, that would be a sucker. You could remove that. I don't want another production stem to grow. A production stem or a sucker are the same thing, and it's basically going to grow stem, leaf, flower clusters. The flowers will create tomatoes, and it keeps growing and growing. You want to manage the size back so that you can take care of the plant and again manage disease and manage pests. As we continue up this plant, we see another leaf, main stem, nothing in there. So it's sort of like this. You have the main stem, this finger right here, comes up, a leaf comes out, the main stem continues, and then right in there is the sucker. That's what you remove out. So as we continue up this plant, another leaf, a really small sucker there, we'll remove that. We continue up the main stem, another leaf, right in there, another sucker, and here's the best example, and I'm going to leave this one. I'm taking the ones from the bottom because I want less growth down there to let the air circulate through. As we get to here, there's a little sucker. Now let's remove that. Main stem, the leaf comes out, main stem continues, you see flowers. Right in the joint, this is what is called a sucker, but it will also turn into a full production stem and create tomatoes. We're going to let this grow because I want more production stems up here away from the soil because I want to get more tomatoes. You can remove it if you want. Some people will only keep one stem growing all the way up the tomato. You can do that. In the case here, Mick is turned into 3 stems. We could actually, let's do that just to show you. We have a main stem coming up, it splits into 2, and then it has a sucker that's growing right here. That would be 3 production stems. We're going to just keep this 2 from here. So we have a V, it splits. This right here is another sucker, and it's growing nicely, and it'll be developing flowers soon. We're going to leave that there. But you kind of get the idea is you go up the main stem, that was a sucker growing, and you just work your way up the plant, and that's how you identify the suckers. Now, I can't tell you what suckers to take off because it's really an art. There's no set way that you should keep 5 or you should keep 6 or only use 3. That's really up to you. But this is the best way to really get a plant off the ground, remove some bottom leaves, let air circulate through, have a sense of what suckers are and whether or not you want to keep them, and then you just keep taking care of the plant as it grows upwards. Now that we created a piece of living art, and the reason I say that is because pruning is not an exact science. You don't have to do it. You don't even have to stake a tomato. You could just let it grow. But we do it to manage what? Again, pests, disease, size. So experiment with it, see what you like, and see what works for you in your garden. Now that Mick has been cut and poked at, we're going to give him a drink of water-soluble fertilizer, and we're going to do a top dressing using the compost that I made in my Mantis composter, the back porch compost. So I have my fish emulsion and my compost. I like to mix it with a little bit of peat moss before I put it down. And you want to go ahead and just drop the compost around your tomato plant. It's a slow and low fertilizer, which means it'll feed over a good couple of weeks. This plant's probably good for a month. Compost is like a 111 NP and K, much lower than actually. But you don't need high NP and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to take care of your plants. So once you put the compost down, water it in with your water-soluble fertilizer. Every time you water your plants or it rains, it will dilute, break down some of the compost on the surface, and it will get to the tomato surface roots. This tomato will be great for another 3 to 4 weeks before we have to feed it again. Please subscribe to my channel so you can watch the next video in the Gardening 101 series. And if you're interested in getting a composter, check out mantis.com. I use the back porch composter in my garden. Thanks for watching.